of 2025 and welcome to the Governance and Audit Committee meeting today of the 22nd of January. As usual, I'd like to encourage any comments and questions from members of the committee, including lay members. We have had apologies for some, so Jeremy, if I could hand over to you for apologies.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apology from David Roberts.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures of interest, please? No, thank you. If we can go through the minutes then of the meeting of the 27th of November. If you go page by page for accuracy. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, and page 9. If they're an accurate reflection of that meeting, could I have some hands up to approve, please? I've got Paxton, I've got councillors around the table and some councillors online as well. Okay, thank you for that. And if we can move quickly then onto the main part of our agenda, and we'll have the first paper, which is the update on the development of the contract management framework. And we've got Chris Williams to present the paper. If you could take it that we've read the report, but if you can pick up any salient points that you want us to focus on, that.
Okay. Yes. So, update on the contract management framework following the audit of waivers that was previously discussed at the committee, and to look at facilitating an enhanced focus on the subject matter of that audit, which was putting into place appropriate contract paperwork, ensuring contract compliance and appropriate knowledge. I've advised sort of via communications that what I'm presenting today is a draft paper, not the final product. Rationale for that is that, I think we probably touched on it last time, there's a major change afoot with the public procurement landscape. Context is United Kingdom left the European Union, and a lot of our procurement rules were derived sort of common European framework. So that gave both the UK government a chance to look at this, but also the Welsh government under devolution, and both have been active in that domain. So in the context of me moving forward on this, I've always wanted to, and I think I expressed at the time, to ensure this all sort of melded together and was coherent in terms of the new legal obligations. Some are defined, some are not yet defined, and so I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. So, yeah, where we are at the moment, one of the major parts I mentioned in 1.6 is something called the Social Partnership and Public Procurement Act Wales, which will introduce a new socially responsible public procurement duty. And this links to another piece of legislation, which is called the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, which is all about ensuring sustainability in everything that we do. Social, cultural, economic, linguistically with the Welsh language, many facets to it. And I think what happened was, to my interpretation, they wanted this sort of flow down from Europe, moving that aside to UK to the Wales part of legislation. So that Welsh bit is still under, our subsidiary pillar is still under development. And the latest information I have on that is that that won't be now put in place until January next year. So we'll be getting a lot more consultation on that in the near future. I attended a briefing on that just last week, and I was just going to mention some of the points from that, if that's okay. It could have derived from the Welsh government. Yeah, so duties to commence later. There will be a requirement for us to put in place socially responsible procurement objectives. Now, we already put in place corporate objectives. Hopefully I'm linking this all together to the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. So you would have under that, of course, the climate response to the climate change agenda. Safeguarding is another key issue. We already work on those, as you can imagine, through procurement, whether that's through looking to source electric vehicles or solar panels and air source heat pumps. But there's going to be an additional reporting requirement on that. So it takes it from a sort of well, straight into the procurement arena, basically. So that we're expecting that guidance on how to proceed on that front. They say guidance to be drafted by summer 25, objectives for contracting authorities to be then set in the second half of this year. So there's a lot of movement going on with that. It'll dovetail into our corporate reporting. There will be a need then to publish performance against those, waiting for guidance of how that might look. But to the extent where our suppliers will also be asked to feed performance reporting in that. So hopefully it'll create a great suite of information as to how Wales is responding to these challenges. Just have a look. So there's other components to this legislation which relates to the workforce and supplier subcontracting and how that's going to be delivered. Haven't seen those clauses yet, but the intent, I think, will be to ensure that where we are working with suppliers, particularly on an outsourcing arrangement, that any staff terms and conditions are on parity with the local authority. I think that affects us to a great extent, but that's the idea behind the legislation. There will be other sort of payment related compliance elements to this to be determined. We will be required to create a contract register, which we already have, of all our contracts, but to publish that in a new way. So there's a multitude of things that are going to become part of that. So in terms of this contract framework, for me, it's a matter of understanding how this all links together, ensuring when I go out to colleagues across the council, it's all coherent and people can understand how this will fit together. I'm moving on to part 1.9 of my report. So talking about the UK level and the Wales level, the UK level, some stuff is now being implemented in the next few months. So those are what I would call sort of technical rule changes rather than perhaps more the sort of substance of what we actually do. But in terms of the technical rule changes, part 1 is going to be again around transparency and a new requirement that we publish all our contracts at £25,000 plus on a new UK-wide central database. So you'll see that coming to fruition now by the spring and should have access to that. And we'll show everything that's going on, not just in Swansea, but across the entire UK. So that's a new thing that has additional sort of functionality built into it. So one of the issues has been around suppliers saying they have to access lots of different systems and across the UK. In Wales, we've had some centralisation through something called Sell to Wales, which is a Welsh government-funded platform which all local authorities use. But there's going to be extra bits bolted onto this. So you're getting a more coherent system, which is what was demanded through the legal consultation across the UK. So that part is going ahead. There are other parts which will come later. So we will have to also publish subsidiary payment information to suppliers. So that's separate from the contract, is what we're paying them under the contract. That will come in later this year, about summertime. And so working on the reports for that. They'll be automated through the IT Fusion system. That'll be part of that. We'll be publishing procurement pipelines. So this isn't what we've spent or entered into. This is stuff we are looking to do in future. And again, this all links back to this central system. It'll be mandated across the UK with the benefit there to suppliers of increased visibility, increased transparency. So that's where we've got a lot of moving parts. In terms of my consultation internally, and also with cabinet member, it's to develop this thing in a coherent way, and we package this all together. So if I move to, if I may, to Appendix 1 of the report, which is the draft contract management framework. Here, I mean, where I've been looking at is in terms of what is the initial subject matter that we would want to look at, and how to keep a focus on it. Sort of two different parts. So the keeping a focus on it is set up a meeting internally, working with my team, but also particularly legal colleagues to look at these type of issues as we'll come on to, this effective management of contracts, mitigation of risk, ensuring compliance under the objectives you'll see there in Appendix 1. And then having that sort of consistent focus on those important topics as a response to the waivers audit. And that, as I mentioned, that sort of overarching governance structure. Effectively, it's just regular review, constant sort of focus on these matters, so we ensure we keep them in our line of sight. This will be probably more important right now because of all the changes that are coming in. There's a need to ensure they're communicated and people understand what's going on. So moving on to section 3, you move into some of the subsidiary components of that. First one, supplier questionnaire. This is our front door to dealing with new partners, suppliers, stakeholders. It could be social enterprises, but we still need to have high quality understanding of these organizations, their insurance status, their certification status, all the sort of good quality contract management things that all decent organizations do. Moving into financial checks, insurance verification, regulatory compliance. These are the sort of overarching themes that we've decided on for the moment. Moving on to things like staff training. I've had discussions there about expanding that. So with all this new legislation, there is a swathe of training coming out of the UK government. The Welsh stuff is still in development, obviously, because the legislation isn't set yet. But there is at the UK government level a new contract management framework training product. So I'll be circulating that, and I've received endorsement from CMT to get as many people as is appropriate for to use that training suite to make sure those involved, working with our colleagues and heads of services across the authority, where they have staff involved in these type of activities, that they have access to the training, so you can be considered competent in these areas. Like I said, it's a new resource. It's a good resource. I've done the training myself. It's very comprehensive. So it marries into the changing landscape and puts us on a solid footing going forward. And there may be other more industry specialist stuff that colleagues can also use. And I mentioned some of the things like the Institute of Civil Engineers and so forth, because you have various specialisms in the council. So I'll be working through that. In terms of where we go with this from here, I think it's about, as I said, two things: using this as a memory aid for colleagues to allow them to say, look, these are your obligations, and we can signpost you to different forms of either training or knowledge or existing document sets in the council. So it's kind of a shortcut without being a shortcut. It gives, because there'll still be all the other robust information that is required, but perhaps more emphasis on certain parts. There's that, and then there's that legislation. As and when that comes on stream and we have clarity, that will be a key part of this to ensure that's fully integrated, and all officers are aware of the new landscape, which will be, as I said, finalised later this year, early next year. So it is a time of major change. So if that's okay, I'd leave it there for your question.
That's fine. Thank you for that. Any questions? Councillor Mike Lewis?
Yeah, thank you, Chris, for the presentation. Just a couple of questions, really. In 1.9, it says, will now be published the new UK Central Digital Platform. What implications will that have on local procurement and Sell to Wales initiatives that we've been following to try and enhance the business in Wales, basically, and locally? That's the first one. And the other thing is, what impact on procurement timelines will this new legislation have?
Thank you. I don't think it's going to have any negative impact on what we do. I think there'll be a period of adaptation required by both us as a council and by suppliers in getting used to the new system. Right now, the system doesn't exist for me to show you, or I haven't accessed it yet. I haven't seen it. So there may be things that crop up that I'm unaware of. But the idea, they were very strong, I think, when they were discussing this, that this should improve the ability of particularly small and medium-sized companies to access government contracts. They would know more, they would see more, and so forth. In terms of the practicalities of accessing that database, we don't know yet, is the truth. And I'm certainly happy to, certainly will keep an eye on it and happy to communicate that back once I've seen it in practice. So yeah, it's a wait and see, I'm afraid, for that one, but nothing there. And in terms of timelines, again, I don't foresee any, once things are established and operating, I don't see any negative impact. From my side, there is a bit the fact that some of this is due to come in March and we haven't seen it yet, which is going to be a peak load. But to mitigate that, we've had the Welsh Government to send out, because they manage the Sell to Wales platform, they have access to all the data that's on all the suppliers registered on. We've had them to send out on a regular basis direct communications to staff who are registered, the company staff who are registered on that, so they'll have it. At least they know what's coming. And we've supplemented that to our supplier base with also that mirror communication as well. It would have been ideal if we could have said, look, do this now, and then it would have been clear, but at least we warmed them up to the fact that change is coming. So on that second point, I think there might be a short-term thing to manage our way through, but once that's through, it should be good.
Yeah. Councillor Jeff Jones is next, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, Chris, very interesting. Quite a lot of changes here. I can, I think quite a bit of work actually for yourself. But with regards to suppliers with existing contracts, will this mean any change to or renegotiation of any terms and conditions or whatever, or is it just going to be a transparent change? I know it'll affect, shall we say, new contracts or new processes to get the contracts in place, but what about existing contracts?
Thank you. Sorry, I should have said, yes, great point. No, it doesn't affect existing contracts. They were constructed under one body of law and they can maintain their integrity until that finishes, basically. But then anything new will be. So that, yeah, there will be some change at that point. But for the current contracts, no negative effect.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Mike White is next.
Yes, thank you, Chris. In regards to the draft you've setting out now for the contract management framework, the three key areas there. Do you believe this is obviously the main backbone now that departments will have to take on board first? This is the main sort of structure then of what is requested and what's required. Plus, if that can be put within the document when you put it together. In regards then to the new act that's coming in and legislation coming in, do you think there's going to be any sort of areas touched on in regarding to the tendering process regarding when it goes out through procurement? And thirdly, you mentioned about the training and obviously the cabinet and hopefully all the directors are in as well, and other staff that you feel are relevant to the training. But in regards to education, which obviously I've touched on this subject before when obviously you've done a presentation, because of the amounts of schools spend, and of course they obviously they've got a delegated budget anyway, which they decide to use for what they feel is needed within the school. It's only the capital programme really that we really can say, that we can look at within the actual process. But do you think plus it should be plus mandatory for perhaps head teachers to have the appropriate training once the new legislation comes in, taking on board the previous points I raised about the amount of money that is actually spent by schools. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, to take those points, regard to the objectives and the scope, I've constructed them primarily around the audit and those being priorities for focus. So are they all? I would say not, but they're the sort of priority ones given discussion. Within the training, though, to jump to that training, which I mentioned, was offered by the UK government through its government commercial college. It's far broader, and we will be offering that to all staff, and it will cover a wider base, you know, how to manage suppliers, payment issues, performance issues, and so forth. So I think the training then does create that wider space and agenda. So I would agree there are other things that have been covered. What's here perhaps is the priorities based on where we started from this conversation. With regard then to the impact on tendering of the new laws, there will be an impact in a sense, I think, because, and this is potentially, given that I've yet seen the legislation, but assuming the Welsh government comes to us and says, you must do X, whatever X might be, then we would need to factor that into tenders. So there is definitely a potential impact of how this is going to work. It might be clauses in contracts. It might be other mandated. So when we go out to ask for something from a supplier, we say, what's your cost? What's your quality? But the Welsh government say, you also have to do this. And then that would be interesting to see what that dialogue is. So potentially, I'll say that for the moment. I think there could be potential impact, although hopefully it will be more a sort of high-level guidance. For example, you need to report on, you know, what you're doing with climate change initiatives. So we will be able to factor in, following through our corporate approach, a sort of an A to Z approach. You know, what have we just decided as a council that, you know, you've decided are the objectives, and then it sort of naturally follows on from that, rather than having something coming in from the outside. So it's a bit of a, as I say, a work in progress, and we'll see where we get to. But I think there will be an impact. You know, there must be if they're bringing in laws on that front. And then with regard to head teachers, we provide them as you know, as our past discussions have taken us into that realm of guidance, of knowledge, of information, and we have a regular standing group which looks at that and communicates that to schools. Do I think it was mandatory? I suppose gut feel I don't think it's mandatory. The schools will work with, as you know, delegated budgets, but they still work a lot with different council services, and long may that relationship continue, because you have a lot of expertise in the council offices I would want them to use, and to explain why that is important to use, not least of which you mentioned things like capital expenditure. But there may be other areas where they wish to do things on their own as schools, and I think we would simply at this stage point them to the relevant training and offer that to them. Yeah, would be the best way forward.
Okay, then take one final question. This Julie Davis.
Sorry, Chair. My question's been already covered by others.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for that. Thank you for answering the question so clearly. Just a couple of comments from me. Obviously, the contract management framework you've got is a draft, and you know, there's three main objectives. You know, are not challenged in any way. I'm particularly keen to ensure that the compliance element of that is rigorous and robust by way of a management control. I'm also assuming there will be a procedural document that will complement this framework, and I am keen to see management controls within that process and procedures, I don't want management to place total reliance on the internal audit work. I think it's incumbent on managers to have adequate internal controls built in, along with adequate supervision over that, so that there is absolutely no question over the compliance issue, even if it means, raising a number of orders to come under that £25,000 threshold. You've got a mechanism of seeing, I'm going to say there's a £30,000 contract here, but they've raised £10,000 orders to circumvent that. So I expect those controls to be very rigorous and robust in light of the new legislation. Gordon, do you want to follow up on that?
I think it's a sort of general principle point I'm making there. I mean, the ethos of public procurement in general is that if we go out to market, if we go out with robust contracts, allow open competition and transparency, we'll get the best value. And that's not just price, but in terms of quality of solution. So now the UK government uses a metric of 5% of spend. By naturally following through robust processes, you are, versus, if I put it on the other end of the scale, if you just gave the money to one company constantly without any competition, but like your mobile phone bill, if you stick up with the same provider, the charges go up. If you periodically look at open competition, you get better rates. That's a sort of ethos of public procurement. So we spend per year in the region of £300 million. So naturally, by having good, robust processes, by putting this work in place, and I agree about all the the process control and management controls behind it, we do have those and have been developing them in tandem with this. That means our total bill of what we spend with third parties would be £15 million less by being robust. It would be £15 million more per year if we weren't. So that's the type of principle answer to this, and why it's important that we do this type of work. Does that make?
Yeah. Didn't say everyone's budget gets cut by 5% under the regime. That's definitely happen.
Sorry,
Yeah, no,
Chair,
it's not.
we can't hear Gordon.
Sorry, I was just questioning the word efficiency, and the explanation is that you would expect to see a 5% efficiency using this procedure. And I'm just saying, would that relate to a 5% cut in the purchasing cost to the council?
I think I'd sort of flip it back and say, if we don't do this type of work, if we were to have, like I said, I'm trying to sort of provide a comparison, but if we didn't do sort of robust procurement, it would be likely that our costs would rise by that sum, if that makes sense, because you wouldn't be going out and having open competition, robust contract arrangements, and so forth. So the straight answer is no. I wouldn't expect to see a £15 million saving from this, but what I would expect if this all didn't exist would be increases in costs.
Okay, I'm keen now to draw this to a close, and I think we've given it quite a good airing, and look forward to further update on this. I think it's an area that we need to keep up to speed with, particularly with the management controls and the procedural documents and so on and so forth. So thank you for that, and Chris, I appreciate your time. If we can move on then to agenda item 5, which is the Place Internal Control Environment 24-25, and welcome Mark Wade to the committee meeting today to take us quickly through the content of the report. Just for members to be aware, I have had a quick conversation with Mark before the meeting, because members will recall that we've asked for sight of the directorate's risk registers when the directors come to the table. So we've got an insight into the risks the directorates are managing opposed to the corporate risks that we have regularly. and also if we can have some sort of sight of what the successes have been of the directorate. So let's hear the good news as well as the challenges that the directorates are facing as well. And I'm very minded of places a very big, diverse directorate, and I just want to be, sure that we've got that focus, which we can see and gain assurance from. Minded also that scrutiny committees do dig into the detail where there are challenges and risks across. So just to let members know, I have had that conversation. So the report on the next occasion will look slightly different. Okay, over to you, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thanks to the committee for inviting me along. Afternoon, everybody. Yes, certainly the next iteration of this report will reflect those requested changes. So that's not a problem at all. So just give an overview of the report. I'll work on the basis that everybody has read it. Very much good governance is our focus within the directorate as it is across the whole of the council currently. The report sets out the control environment, including processes around risk management and how we use the resources which are made available to us to actually deliver services, and those frontline public services which the Police Directorate operates have a very high profile. The Directorate itself is now split into 6 service areas after a small structural change last year. We still have our transport and highway section together. Building services now sits alongside waste services. We have property services, housing and public health, planning and city regeneration, and parks and cleansing is now being combined in with cultural services this year. So it's a change from previous iterations of the report. In terms of summary of main risks, then we're managing multiple risks, as you can imagine, across the breadth of services that we do have. Main ones to flag for the purposes of this report are the pressures around homelessness and temporary accommodation currently, as well as then some of our headline pressures around delivering ambitions around net zero by 2030. Financial costs and pressures you won't be surprised to hear me raise, and they are across the board for the authority services, but we're seeing that in the council's housing revenue account now as well, due to rise in demand and cost of services, but we're managing that in amongst our budget allocations currently. I've referenced data breaches. No cause for concern here, but there is a slight upward trend in data breaches, but that's reflective of the high volume of customer contact that the Directorate has. But we're making strong efforts to ensure that we learn from any breaches that do occur, and are going through our regular reviews and training updates for staff in respect of that. Mentioned in the Chair's point around positive achievements. There certainly are a number in the Directorate. We have a significant investment programme through our capital works every year. Through the city regeneration programme, you'll see various new buildings, refurbished buildings springing up across the cityscape currently, and a lot of that is delivered by colleagues in the Police Directorate. Similarly, our More Homes programme, seeing increase in the housing stock to try and tackle some of the pressures we've got around supply of good quality housing. We also have a regular events programme, which you'd be familiar with as well. Section 2 of the report covers off risk management and our arrangements around business continuity, which are often tested. We have strong arrangements and working relationships in place with the cabinet members to ensure risks are brought to their attention. That will include the highlighted points around homelessness and net zero there as well. Section 3 sets out the performance management arrangements. You won't be surprised to hear that we have lots and lots of performance indicators that give us sort of a dashboard of performance across services, and highlight both positive and some more challenging areas of performance for us as well. In terms of planning and decision making. We're just about to start the annual review and refresh of our service planning processes for the coming financial year. So we're getting into that now to ensure that our aims and objectives are set up and reflective of what's required in the corporate plan. Budget and resource management is a big area of concentration. Our what's known as the PFM meetings, the performance and financial management meetings, take place once a month, with a directorate management team meeting in between that once a fortnight. That gives us a good, strong overview of our key performance indicators, the allocation of resources, and how we're performing against current budgets allocated as well. So that sets out the way that we managing resources. That includes management of absence, which is a key focus. We have a workforce of just over 3,000 employees. It does vary slightly because of recruitment, but it's there or thereabouts. So the management of absence is important to us. We need to ensure that staff are supported to remain in work, and ensure that we deal with absences through our set policies and offer support, for example. So absence has been fairly static for the last couple of years, but we have seen a slight downward trend since 2022, as the table sets out there. We have arrangements in place, which are set out in section 6, around managing and detecting fraud and dealing with any financial impropriety. And that is by having a robust hierarchy of controls in place for spend, for example. And we work very closely with our internal auditors around all of that area of work. Compliance is set out in section 7. We have regular contact, as the chair has mentioned, in relation to scrutiny panel sessions. And also then our engagement with the service transformation committees is extensive through climate change and nature recovery, and also the economy and infrastructure STC as well, that oversees the development of policies around our regeneration programme and the way that we spend money, for example. Senior management teams sit underneath the Place Directorate Management Team. They are chaired by heads of service, and they are used as the method of control and communication then within the specific service areas, and that cascades down then into officer one-to-ones and appraisals as part of our standard processes. We have a significant programme and project assurance system in place, and a series of project managers who are appointed to assist the services in both the development and then the delivery of projects and programmes as well. Building services is a significant example of that, the delivery of the capital programme then that I've mentioned for both housing and education. And similarly in city regeneration, their delivery of high spend and high profile projects for example 71-72 Kingsway has robust project management arrangements around it. So I will move on then to data security, and that then speaks to I mentioned the high levels of personal information statutory requirements that we are required to adhere to. And we have processes in place for dealing with any data breaches. Officers work very closely with the Council's Data Protection Officer, who regularly attends our PNFM sessions as well, to deal with the oversight which is required with regard to trends in that area. I mentioned data breaches there. There is a slight upward trend, albeit it is a very, very small percentage error rate in relation to the overall amount of correspondence that we may deal with on a daily, weekly and a monthly basis within a directorate. Partnership collaboration and governance is set out in section 11. We are partners ourselves in a number of different initiatives, including the City Deal, for example. I also make reference then to the Corporate Joint Committee South West Wales, which is I suppose it's is a growing area for us. And in particular, our highways and transportation colleagues have been very heavily involved with the CJC recently as part of the development of a regional transport plan, which will see priorities for transport being set out and infrastructure investment in that area. And that sits across the region then for Neath, Talbot, Pembrokeshire, Carmarthenshire and Swansea. And we're working well there with colleagues to help focus investment in the region. So overall, Chair, then I think that's a fair summary of the internal control environment for place, and I'm happy to take any questions at that point.
Before I open up for questions, can I just note with regards to paragraph 11.3 and reference to the South West Wales Corporate Joint Committee governance? Are you referring there to the Governance and Audit Committee, or is it the main corporate committee?
No, it'd be the corporate joint committee itself, yes, which is constituted separately.
Okay, then let's open up for questions. Councillor Mike Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, there's only one thing that caught my eye, really, which was the total working days lost. Could you, I know if you got it there, or could you get us the percentage of lost days as opposed to the total amount of working days across the council? Because there's nothing to compare that with how many days are actually worked across the council. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Yes, I can provide that that information with regard to a percentage by way of a follow-up to today's discussion. Yes, it's not a problem.
Thank you. Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, Mark. Obviously, looking at the vast area you covered with the new directorate, what I'd like to know is you've mentioned obviously about because the situation with homelessness and that, and getting buildings back in use. Are we still using our apprenticeships to perhaps work on these types of properties, and are we still having an apprenticeship enrolment within building services? And secondly, then, in regards to the service with parks, as you say, this is a vast area that is working, and of course, with the recent issues we've had with the storms, and those teams sort of been flat out and working on the clock, which we must applaud really the efforts they put in. Are we still taking on sort of seasonal staff within that area to perhaps provide and keep these services going? And in regards to cleansing, can you just clarify that the CWAT teams, I know for all members or perhaps lay members aren't aware of the CWAT team, but they do a tremendous amount of work within wards and do excellent, standards work as well. Can you assure us that the service is going to continue? Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, for the questions. Certainly, in terms of apprentices, yes, I can be given some thorough assurance. We're very proud of the apprenticeship scheme that we have within building services. So there's an active annual recruitment process, which will hopefully long continue in relation to our tradespersons. I've seen just this week actually the reference to 2 of our apprentices being nominated for Apprentice of the Year, for example. So it's an area of work that we spend a lot of time and effort on in terms of growing our own, because it's important for a wide variety of reasons, and we've seen some particular successes from that programme. So yeah, that is active. We do use the apprentices to give them a wide range of experiences, including just yesterday I was up in Boynamice at a refurbished property which has been largely delivered by our apprentice tradespersons. So an active programme there, Councillor, just to provide some assurances around that. In terms of parks, yes, very much. I'd like to mention the team effort and the efforts of the parks and tree services team to deal with the effects of Storm Dara at the back end of last year, and efforts to continue the clear up there are still ongoing currently. So thank you for raising that. And very much so, yes, seasonal staff are part of our way of dealing with service pressures, which are seasonal in both in the parks and then things like our beach and foreshore as well. So they are actively recruited each year, and 2025 will see another recruitment campaign ready for this coming summer season in relation to keeping our public realm and our parks looking as good as they possibly can. In relation to cleansing and the CWAT team you've mentioned, the cleansing ward operative team, as the acronym is, and the good work that they've been doing. I'm aware that it is a significant labour resource for us to supplement our residual cleansing functions, and they've been able to deliver on a number of ward-specific schemes in accordance with members highlighting work programmes for them. So yes, there's every intention to carry to continue with the CWAT work, subject to available budget, Councillor. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick comment first about the QUAT team. I think what's been the big secret is the fact that they do photos of before and after and circulate those, and they really do show such a difference. And I think that's definitely a way to go, and I hope they continue to do that. My point was just out of interest. 11.2 refers to working together with the climate change and nature recovery agenda, and I'm just wondering what kind of projects we're talking about.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I believe those projects are mainly community engagement related, and they are things like provision of energy advice, for example. So services there to allow people to manage their household energy bills, for example, and how they may go about reducing those. So there are a variety of projects that sit under that, not all of which I'm familiar with, but if you need any further information on that, I'd be more than happy to have that provided.
That's fine. And just wanted to add, I forgot to say this, I'd like to pass my thanks on to all the workforce, having to put up with how many storms have we had so far? Something like 5 in the last few months, and the amount, the work that they've done to try and keep on top of that. Yeah, my thanks goes out to all of them.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Mark, for the report. You know, I can see you've highlighted quite a lot of areas where there's, shall we say, budget pressures. You know, the sickness, of course, doesn't help and so on. But one part you've actually got 2.4, perhaps excuse my ignorance, a risk being closely monitored during 24-25 is the growing homelessness pressure resulting in a red risk status. So it wasn't red before. So what's actually driving it now? And, you know, why wasn't it red before then?
I think this one has been a significant risk and issue for us for quite some time. This one, but it's more of a glowing red status at the moment. It's a national issue. There's a shortage of good quality accommodation, and in Wales we have particular legal duties, and rightly so, around provision of services for persons who may be at risk of being homeless or are homeless. And there's also a Welsh Government policy element to this as well, which is around what's known as no one left out. So effectively, if you require housing, then the local authority is obliged to provide it for you. So there is a number of factors which drive the situation we find ourselves in now. The economic climate currently is very difficult We also see issues around factors such as domestic violence, for example, which is on the rise, and relationship breakdowns, which then see persons perhaps outside of their normal housing circumstances, and certainly issues around substance misuse as well, which can be contributing factors to homelessness. So Swansea is no real different to any other local authority in Wales and across the UK, really, but we as a city authority do see some of those issues being quite pronounced. So got a number of mitigating measures in place, but it is a continued battle now. We mentioned our frontline staff in relation to things like parks, for example, but we have frontline staff dealing with housing, urban housing options, and they have some real difficult challenges on their hands at the moment, and some very, very dedicated staff there. Targeted towards trying to manage this overall issue of homelessness at the moment. It very much is a national issue currently, but one that we are very committed to managing, mitigating, and driving downwards. So hopefully that's of use.
Yeah, I know you can't tell me, perhaps the financial cost and so on, or the allocation in the budget, but what sort of percentage increase is it actually, shall we say, causing then, per year? Is it, how much is it actually growing per annum?
It's grown quite significantly over the last 3 to 5 years. Councillor, you're right. I don't have the specific figures in front of me now, but it's certainly multiple millions of pounds that we spend each year on temporary accommodation. We do get financial support from Welsh Government for that, and that was particularly pronounced during the pandemic, for example. But that support is slowly withdrawing, but the demand is not currently. So there is a multi-million-pound budget allocation to managing homelessness each year, and that again is fairly typical of large local authorities such as ourselves across the country at the minute.
Follow-up question on that one. Is the growth attributed to neighbouring local authorities, homeless people moving in and out of Swansea?
There can be sometimes, obviously we've got permeable borders, and people are quite transient between them, particularly some of our communities that are on the border with Neath Talbot, for example, and also Carmarthenshire. So we do see some issues such as that, and for example, our ability and supply of temporary accommodation, for example, is higher perhaps in authorities such as ourselves, other than our neighbours. But we do have good working relationships with the neighbouring authorities as well, so we're not, I guess, passing on pressures to each other. So there are good working relationships between the officers to look at that. But most definitely, movement between authorities is an issue for us, and the officers will look at where someone's family circumstances may be and their local connection before making decisions on what services are provided to them.
Okay. Julie Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Mark, thank you for the quite comprehensive report. I've got 2 observations and 1 question. So if I take the observations first, following on from the Chair's comments about an executive summary, it might be useful for the Governance and Audit Committee to understand the issues around KPIs that are not being achieved. And my second observation is that you've stated paragraph 1.4 and in your narrative that data breaches have increased slightly, but at paragraph 10.3 on page 25, it appears that year-to-date data breaches have dropped to 11 in comparison to the previous full year of 24 data breaches. So perhaps you could have a look at the stats you've used in that table. My question is in relation to paragraph 6.2 on page 22. You mention a number of areas in the report where controls are operating effectively, Could you outline what controls are in place to optimise efficiency and minimise the risk of effective time theft, given that a high proportion of police staff are not office bound? Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the observations and the question as well. Certainly, I can ensure that the focus around KPIs, which are under pressure, can form part of next year's report and the executive summary. Data breaches point is one I picked up myself when I was just doing some preparation for this today. The actual, it's the trend over time. I appreciate the in-year data breaches are actually down according to the table. The trend over time is a slight uptick. So we have just been focusing in on making sure that that is not something that continues to rise over time. It may well be the end of year status. So the current year suggests that we're on top of that. But it's just to show the overall rise, shall we say, over time has been recognised. But I appreciate the point in title. Yeah, the table suggests that we're actually doing pretty well this year. So I will take the chair's points around focusing on the positives, and that would be one, for example. So in terms of controls around time, that's certainly around our time recording systems and our monitoring and supervision. We do have a very diverse workforce, some office-based, some home-based, some working out in the elements as we've spoken before. So we have quite clear procedures around time recording and expectations for officers. We do regular checks, for example, of time recording, be they through electronic systems or manual ones that are in operation. So we also have a performance management system, so we're able to quantify what work staff should be getting through in a typical day or week, for example, and if there are concerns with regard to performance, if somebody perhaps wasn't putting the time in, then that would be highlighted through that process. So can't promise to cover all bases, but there are strong and robust systems in place for ensuring staff are accountable for the hours that they work effectively. So hopefully that's of use.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, then can I just thank you, Mark, for attending today. I appreciate the time because I know you're busy. And I look forward to receiving a different format report with content for the next visit.
Thank you,
Thank you so much. If we move quickly now on to agenda item 6, please. And that's the review of the accounts receivable function. I think, Rachel, you're going to quickly take us through this one.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this update report today provides the latest position with regards to the Council's accounts receivable function, particularly the project work that we've been undertaking to reduce aged debt over the last 12 months, and Ness Young provided the last update to you in October. Since that update, I can confirm that one of the remaining outstanding audit recommendations has now been implemented, that of unapplied credits, and we anticipate that the final 2 will be now complete in June of this year. Back in January 24, when we initiated the specific project to tackle aged debt that had been static for a long period, there were 6,272 invoices outstanding, not yet paid by debtors. 1 year later, this is now reduced to 1,654. So a total of 4,600 odd invoices have now been cleared, which is 74% of the volume of outstanding invoices. And last year, the 6,000 invoices held a value of over £2.2 million. The project work has enabled 50% of that value to have been cleared, and the outstanding value is now just over 1.1 million. So table 1 within the report provides you with a breakdown of progress over the last 12 months. And of that outstanding 1.1 million yet to work through, 17% of that is with service departments for progressing. And the remainder is all going through other routes and is categorised clearly for you, half of the value of which is has been referred to legal for pursuing. The report also provides an update with regard to all of our outstanding debt, not just the aged debt. And we have seen in table 2, all categories of debt are reducing, showing that not only is the project work delivering a clearance of the backlog of invoices, but it's also being able to sustain proactive work in this area as it comes in. So we will continue the project team work into 2025 to build on the reductions we've seen in the last year. And we're in the process now of reshaping our objectives for this coming period. We anticipate that continuance of the group will mitigate any risks that might arise, whether that be resource levels to process the invoices, emerging issues with customers perhaps, or perhaps change in the level of performance from service departments that we've been working collaboratively with to deliver this improved position. So the combined efforts of the accounts receivable team, colleagues within the legal department, and then those wider across the council who are responsible for raising invoices has meant that the situation with debt management has significantly improved, and we continue to see progress each month. So that should provide hopefully committee with assurance that the right actions are being taken, and sufficient focus is being given to this very important area of work. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to comment what a remarkable achievement you've made in that 12 months, and it just goes to show how successful a concentrated piece of work can be in these areas of quite great risk, really. So I've got no questions. Are there any questions or comments? Councillor Mike Lewis? Sorry, Councillor Jeff Jones, you were first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No, I was just going to say, great. You know, what a difference. You know, I know they've been under pressure. You know, staff shortage and so on. But I think this area is so important. You know, it's money that, shall we say, comes into us at the end of the day. And you know, really great work. The only comment I've actually got on table 2 in 33. It's got a 0 to 29 days. Perhaps I can't understand this. In September 24, there's a figure of 32,828,000. Is that an error, or am I misreading it?
No, it's not an error. It is accurate. We have incredible fluctuations day by day within accounts receivable because of the sheer number of payments that are coming in on a daily basis. So this table does fluctuate literally from one day to the next. But as you can see, it drops straight back down to 4.7 the following month. And I would comment on the 0 to 29 days. There's not a change indicated on that table because that's not what we would consider debt at that point. So from the moment that an invoice is raised, obviously it's not considered delinquent in any way until the terms have gone by. We just include that in there so that you can see the actual value and total of what comes through the books.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. What would actually cause that fluctuation to actually go from, you know, 4 million the previous month to 32 million? What sort of items are we actually talking about?
Well, I mean, the time of year is wrong there in terms of council tax arrangements, and that's separate from AR function. So it wouldn't be something as significant as that. It just literally depends on when service departments are raising invoices. So off the top of my head, without going away and asking Michelle and the team, I wouldn't be able to answer that question. But if it's something you're particularly keen on, I can get a breakdown.
No, just interested really. You know, I take on what you actually say, but it seems quite an extraordinary jump, you know, for one period to the next. There we are. Okay, thanks for that anyway.
Councillor Mike White.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to endorse as well the excellent work that's been done by the team. You know, considering, as I say, we've obviously had this on the agenda as members, as you know, for quite a few meetings to try and get to grips with it. And as I say, it's excellent what's been achieved. But also, can you just perhaps clarify? Do you feel, because obviously you've had pressure in the past, but with the introduction of the new Oracle system, have this helped to ease the problems for you as well as a staff and actually department?
So the migration to Oracle Fusion has been like for like, so we haven't had any specific change. I would say that the improvement has been on having a dedicated project team that's come together. So we have invested from the Directorate additional funding for people to actually help with processing the backlog, and it's been the determination of organising additional resource and just being surely focused on engaging with council departments right across and just not letting the matter drop. So I wouldn't say that it's because of Oracle Fusion, but a combination of other things.
Okay, thank you. Chair, it is nice to see that we are working as one councils and all departments working together.
Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. Can I just ask one question with regard to the legal services? Obviously, it's a large figure there. Is that causing any pressure with resource within legal? Are legal able to deal with those sort of volumes?
So in our project team, legal are a key part of understanding where we're at, the volume, and we regularly talk about if we do work in the AR field, that's going to filter through to legal at some point, and therefore are they prepared and ready for the increased demand that comes through there. And again, resource requirements have been flexed to assist with that, so we haven't come across any significant issue at the moment. We are aware of what's coming down the line and we give advance notice of increased work coming their way.
Okay, thank you. Julie, final question?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Rachel, I'd like you to expand on the staffing increases that you mentioned at paragraph 6.1. Have there been staffing increases in the AR team, or is that more related to the project team that's been set up? And if that is the case, if the project team is going to close at a point in the future, do you think that staffing increases would minimise the risk of getting out of hand in the future?
Thank you. So we have confirmed an additional permanent post within the AR team, so that will provide ongoing additional capacity within the overall numbers. And we also have a temporary individual as well, specifically for the project and the backlog. We're confident that with the numbers looking as they are at the moment, the fact that we are reducing the backlog, but also preventing future build-up and maintaining the current position, that will be sustainable going forward. So when the project comes to a close and we lose a temporary resource, once the backlog is sorted, then yes, we're confident that the one additional post we've invested within the AR function will be sufficient.
Thank you.
If I can bring that item to a close, but again, congratulations to everyone involved in that project, a really good success story and a good outcome financially as well. If we can move on then, our next report is Financial Sustainability of Local Government. And if I could welcome Gareth Jones from Audit Wales, just to, if you can, quickly take us through this. Oh, I've missed one of it. I've missed one, sorry. Item 7, it's a verbal one. Developing the in-phase risk management. Who's taking this one?
Yes, Chair, I'm here. Lee
Sorry.
Wenham. Hello.
Yeah. If you can go ahead then.
Yes, I'll be brief as well, Chair. So in-phase is the electronic system we use to record and monitor our performance. We've been working the last several months to put our risk management framework on there as well. Perhaps when you had your last update, we were talking about building the app. We've now largely built it. So that's great news that we've got the app kind of structure there. We've recently imported the information that's on the risk register. So all the information about our risks, we've exported across. In-phase have imported that data. We've been going through it this week to see if there are any glitches, any information that doesn't match where it should be. We've got a development day with them tomorrow to work with their tech team to iron out any glitches. Hopefully that will kind of resolve any outstanding items. If that's the case, the plan would then be to produce Q3 monitoring report for risk through the in-phase system. And that would be done following a further import-export of information in early February, because we would then capture the January data as well. If successful, we would then look to roll out in-phase across all our users from about February the 10th. So we're now in the process of planning that rollout, pulling together information guidance for users, because it's quite a big switch. The systems are very different, the way they need to go in there and the information they need to provide is in different parts of the app. So we just need to provide them with enough guidance. And hopefully, following tomorrow, we'll be in a position to move forward. So at the minute. It's fingers crossed, and we're working closely with InPhase, but some good progress there, I think, Chair.
Okay, I mean, that's good news,
Yeah,
really,
it
because
is.
there was a lot of glitches with InPhase and the ongoing development of that. So that's good news to use. Is it realistic that it will be in for the new financial year?
Yes. So I'm hoping we'll produce Q3 next week through InPhase if there are no issues, and then from February onwards we'll be using it as we would the risk register. So yeah, I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to produce the last quarter through the new use. Yeah.
Because if it's very different to the previous system, then you've got a training element, which is why I'm thinking, is it more realistic it'll be in April 25?
I think what we need to do is, if the system itself is built and all the glitches can be ironed out during January, then it would make sense to get the users on board on February and start playing with it, using it. We'll provide guidance notes, because the longer we don't do that, we're having to continue importing and exporting the information from the existing risk register, which isn't great because it just means we're always chasing the rainbow. So I really want to get to that point where we say, right, we can now do it, and then just work with the users.
Okay.
So I think the information we provide them will be fine in the guidance notes.
Okay, thank you. Julie, did you have a comment?
Oh, thank you. A question, Lee. We've heard from Mark Wade previously about the homelessness red risk, but it has actually materialised into an issue. So will the InPhase app system be able to accommodate issue management as well as risk management?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Yeah, so what we have is the new software. It's based on the new management framework. So we have things like strategic risks, strategic issues, and what it relies on, the actual InPhase system itself relies on input. So Mark's team, under the framework, they have kind of regular catch-ups to discuss their strategic risks and issues, and then the onus is on them to update the database, InPhase database. But yeah, it will accommodate them, and it's based on the new risk management framework, which I think we took you through a couple of months ago. But I'd be happy, Chair, at some point just to recirculate the management framework if that would help as well.
Thank you.
Be helpful, I think.
Okay.
Any further comments? No, I think Ness will keep us up to date as well, won't she, with the developments around that, which may need another sort of short training session for Governance and Audit Committee members, just to have that better insight into what's happening. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm sorry I nearly missed that. If we can go on to agenda item 8, if I'm right this time, and that's Gareth Jones, Audit Wales. Thank you, Gareth. Welcome to the meeting. If I can ask, obviously we've read the paper, we've read the report. If you could pick up any particular points you think Audit Committee need to be minded of, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to briefly present this National Financial Sustainability Report from the Auditor General for Wales. Published in December 2024, we also published our updated local government financial sustainability data tool on the same day. And I will share that with the committee team for circulation to members. That has a number of important indicators for the financial sustainability of not only councils, but also fire and rescue authorities and national parks authorities, going back to 2015-16. This report is the third of our national financial sustainability reports we've done, and we took a more forward-looking view this time. We produced the local reports, which you've received, and I presented that to the committee recently. The key message in your local report was that the council has reasonable arrangements to support its financial sustainability, but there are weaknesses in the delivery and monitoring the saving programmes to support those. That's what we reported. But I'd like to turn now to the key messages of the National Summary Report, which draws on the 22 local reports that we produced. The key message from the Auditor General, and I think it is quite a stark position from the Auditor General, is that the financial position of local government is unsustainable over the medium term unless action is taken. And here, the Auditor General's view, based on the work that we've completed, is that all councils will need to keep up or increase the pace of change if they're to meet the urgency and scale of their financial challenges, some of which we've heard about earlier on today. And the Auditor General concluded that without action by the whole sector, and that includes the Welsh Government, the financial future of local government is unsustainable. And that's to do with the funding pressures that face local government, but also the demand pressures that they also face. And we've recognised that the sector has faced some unprecedented challenges since 2008, and that's affected different councils and services differently. And some of those challenges are outside of their control. And we've articulated some of the real terms changes in terms of the spending by councils in the last 15 years. So, for example, just to highlight to the committee, children and family social services have seen a 94% real change increase, schools an 8% real terms increase, coastal protection 91% increase. But on the flip side of that, areas such as development control have seen a 45% real term decrease, community safety 62%, highways and roads 37% decreases. Those are national pictures. But what we also identified is that many of the challenges faced by Welsh councils are common to the rest of the UK. And as members will be aware, a number of authorities have issued Section 114 reports in England. And there's some key learning that we draw out in the report around some of the common themes that underpin those reports. So those reports where councils are no longer able to sustain themselves financially. And some of those themes include an unwillingness to see the reality of the situation from both officers and members, an absence of leadership where authorities have been unable to take difficult decisions, and that means less problem solving and scrutiny of proposals, inadequate governance processes, and including a significant lack of oversight by councillors, including governance and audit committees, and then weak financial management, which again we didn't identify within Swansea in our local report. Those are important things. What we also found is that councils generally do not take a longer term view of their financial sustainability, and that means that they are very focused on the short to medium term, and that's a challenge for them in terms of light of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, but also looking at what services they can provide in the longer term. We've concluded that councils have generally appropriate financial reporting arrangements for the short and medium term, but that assessing and monitoring the impact of their financial decisions is a weakness across Wales. And without that understanding, it's difficult for councils to understand the extent to which they're achieving value for money in the services they provide. We also did summarise the concerns around national issues and processes that make the financial planning difficult and challenging for councils, and those include the funding formula used by the Welsh Government to distribute funding to local government, the timing of the local government funding settlement, the lack of multi-year settlements, which are present in other spending areas, and the additional responsibilities being placed on councils without commensurate funding being made available. And you've heard of some of those challenges in the presentation around the internal control environment for place earlier on today. That summarises my brief presentation, Chair. Happy to take any questions that you have on this national summary report. Just to be clear, before I finalise, we didn't undertake an assessment of the Welsh Government arrangements in this review because it's a summary of the 22 local reports, so there are no recommendations for either local councils or the Welsh Government within this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gareth. Just one point I want to mention to members is within the report on page 63, I think it's 62, it refers to Denbighshire County Council as it looks as if it's a good practice reference. Gareth has kindly helped me get some additional information around that because it's a matter for Governance and Audit Committee. I've managed to track the detail from Denbighshire, and I'm waiting for Ness to return from her annual leave, and then I'll pick that up with Ness to see if there's anything that we can do to improve the efficiency of our committee and to look at what's been done in Denbighshire. So I'm not saying there is something that we need to do, but I'd like to look at it being as it's cited within the report. Before I open up for questions, Ben, do you have any comments on this?
No, Chair, it is a national report. It's for information only, and I've made very clear in terms of advice when they received the local report as to what was coming nationally. There are no surprises in it, so you should not be shocked or surprised. It just gives some contextual positioning to where we were locally. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And noting that this report is for noting for the committee, if I can ask for some of the questions to be limited in that regard. Okay, Councillor Jeff Jones.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Gareth, I'm certainly not an auditor or anything, you know. It's just clarification really on page, I think it's 12 of your report, and 30. It says, we found that reserves are not always used in a strategic manner. Reserves have been used in some as bridging strategies to balance annual budgets rather than supporting longer term transformation. You know, it goes on and so on, but it actually says in certain circumstances you can use it. So I thought when you actually put reserves one side, you can use those reserves full stop, you know, that's what they're there for. So can you clarify what exactly it means?
Thank you, Councillor Jones. I think what we found in some councils, and I will say again, this is something that is across a piece of national work. This is about how reserves are used strategically. If they're used to plug potentially a funding shortfall in a specific year, that creates a longer term pressure within the budget potentially in subsequent years, because you're shoring up, you're in effect drawing on your savings to fund your current account to get you through that month or that year, and actually that doesn't actually fundamentally look at the demand and the cost of services. So it's about whether or not, yes, you can use them, but there needs to be recognition that they're a one-time only spend, so it's not recurrent that you're coming back to. If you use the reserves in a non-strategic way, it can actually make things more challenging later down the line, and that's why authorities need to have very clear reserves policies. And the use of reserves is obviously something which is considered and approved by councillors as they are presented in accordance with those reserves policies, and to have a really clear mandate for why they're being used so that they actually do help the financial sustainability. So as we talked about, if they're applied to perhaps an investor save transformation agenda, which looks to then have cost avoidance in the future, then that is a strategic use of a reserve. If it's to be used just to tide the authorities through a potential shortfall in funding, that doesn't actually address the fundamental issue, the root cause underneath, and that's what we're looking at there.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Leslie Walton.
Julie was before me. Julie, if you want to go first.
Thank you. Given the weaknesses in delivery and monitoring of the savings programme at Swansea Council, and I don't want to cross over into what scrutiny does here, but would it be possible for Nest to give us an update on any improvements that could be made in terms of the delivery of savings? Because given Ben's subsequent report where there is a forecast shortfall in delivery to the year end, I think this is something that we need to be provided comfort on. And my second question is to Ben, if possible. I wanted to ask Ben whether, given the SIPFA roadmap in terms of avoiding Section 114, whether he has formed any either formal or informal assessment against the SIPFA roadmap. Because, for an example, we've asked the Chief Internal Auditor at previous governance and audit committees, and the Chief Auditor has confirmed that internal audit would review the effectiveness of financial regulations and process going forward. So I'd like to understand whether Ben is content this is now embedded in all audit reviews. Ben, are you able to respond to that?
So I would remind this is for an information report, and I appreciate Julie has asked questions. In terms of the wider assurance, I am alert at all times, and I'm weighing all of my statutory duties in terms of the risks that we face in terms of recovery, resilience, and I recognise what you've said in terms of the first part, in terms of Ness's chairing of the transformation process. So they are right and proper that they are raised. I can assure you I am fully alert and on the record internally, through scrutiny, through cabinet, as you rightly say, where the main remit is and continue to form views all the time and communicate appropriately and make an assessment of where I think we are on that pantheon of financial risk.
Thank you.
Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thanks, Chair. I appreciate the main thrust of this report is national report, but it does give an indication of some of the comments with regard to our council. What I'm a bit puzzled at, particularly now I've heard what Gareth has said about making use of reserves. My understanding of our use of our reserves was far more in terms of strategy, whereas in this it actually says in response to service overspend. I think that's a bit simplistic, and I'm a bit unhappy about that conclusion.
Any comments, Gareth or Ben?
Is that I mean, it's our report. Is that in paragraph 30, Councillor Walton?
It's on page 96.
Or page 57 of your report, Gareth?
Yeah.
So whilst Gareth is looking to refresh his memory
fine.
on that, have you found it, Gareth?
No, keep going.
Yes. So my view again is this is a national report making comments on what some authorities are doing.
Yeah.
My advice is that a council has an annual report from me on the overall reserves, the strategic allocation of reserves, and I continue to give officer advice on to how I think Cabinet informing proposals and council should use those reserves. So I don't think you should read across that it means that that's what is happening locally. You'll form your view in due course when you see budget proposals. But my normal stance is that reserves are applied strategically. They are set aside for a purpose that is intended, and council endorses the advice I give in terms of what should be assumed in terms of taking draws from reserves and for what purposes annually. The last one went to council in September or October. That annual cycle is done and on the record every time.
And just to come in there, Councillor Walton, that this is a national summary report which summarises what happens across the 22 councils, and in some cases we have found that use of reserves to be less than strategic. That is why we're highlighting that as part of our commentary in terms of how local government is managing its finances. We have not, we've concluded, as we have done in Swansea, around the strategic use of reserves. And that's in the local report. That the comment in the national report is a wider commentary based on the 22 councils' arrangements and their arrangements, rather than specifically to Swansea itself. And so that is, we have concluded around the local use of reserves, and we're aware of the policies and the strategic nature of the use of reserves in Swansea. But that is again agreed and signed off by members and as has been set out by the Section 151 officer there in his response.
And we have received previously the local report, which I think we raised similar questions or comments on. Okay, if there are no further comments, it is for noting, as Ben have said, but we are still enabled, it still allows us to comment or question if we wish. Okay, thank you, Gareth. I appreciate you coming today and presenting that report, and also for your help in that query I raised with you earlier this week.
Thank you.
If we can move on to agenda item 9, I'm minded of the time now. We've got half an hour left. Agenda item 9 is revenue and capital budget monitoring. Ben, do you want to take us through this one?
Very briefly, for the same reason, this is for information. It has been to Cabinet in December. It went to scrutiny, I believe, last week. I might be out by a week, but certainly went recently to scrutiny, where the leader and I attended and answered multiple questions on that. I don't intend to repeat all of those, but I'll see what questions are formed. The reality is, my advice in the report, which is in the leader's name, is quite clear that we have service overspending at second quarter and a slight forecast overspend overall. I alluded to at Cabinet and in scrutiny that all the money that was awaited for teachers' pensions, teachers' pay, plus some emergency funding from Welsh Government was turning up literally as the report was being considered. They will all be factored into third quarter, which will be coming back to Cabinet next month, and will be the important third quarter forecast for the outturn, which will fundamentally inform the budget proposals being formed for recommendation to council. That will again go back to detailed scrutiny for post scrutiny on the monitoring report, but also pre-decision scrutiny across the finance panel and the education and social services panels on all of the budget proposals that will be coming forward. I have made quite clear I am concerned about the position. I'm sure you will continue to be concerned. I don't intend to repeat all of those because, as I say, I've used other fora for that. You need to be assured that the PFM process is working, that overspends are being reported, that I am reporting action, and it will come down ultimately to the actions taken by Cabinet endorsing or authorising officers to end up delivering what was an agreed recovery plan operationally. So that's probably all I want to say, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ben, and I acknowledge those comments that you've made. The only comments I'd like to make, and it's not sort of it is related to the report, but where we've got overspends, I just like to note a comment that I've made previously about consideration of service redesign or deep dives to see if there are any efficiency areas to be made, and also one around the monitoring of savings. I recognise you've got a savings monitoring process in place, but if you can just have a look to see, is that giving the results? Is it effective? So it's not questioning the content of the report, it's just I'd like to make those two comments, which would be news to your ears, because I've made them before and I would like them recorded in the minutes again, because I think they're both important. We look at savings, we look at budget restraints, but I never hear, deep dives. Let's have a look at the efficiency of the service. Let's look at, is there any opportunities for service redesign? I don't hear that very often. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I don't hear it through this committee's forum. Are there any questions from anyone? It is for noting, as Ben quite rightly says, and I have looked, it has gone to Cabinet and it has been to scrutiny, which I'm sure Ben have had quite a tough time at both of those forums. Okay, thank you, Ben, for that.
Oh,
If we
sorry,
can...
Chair. I just wanted to ask Ben, Appendix D, the capital schemes, do they provide the council with any income generating opportunities as well as providing benefit for the wider community? Such as Swansea Central Phase 1, 71, 72, the Kingsway offices and the Palace Theatre.
Some specifically do, because we have tenants in there which will ultimately pay us a rental stream or an operating fee. There will be wider spillover benefits in terms of footfall driving through the city centre, but you equally rightly work out that often the majority of our capital spend is for local public good, and it is not normally done for investment purposes, purely for cash return to ourselves, and that's why there is a local public good, a local public service subsidy, and appropriate arrangements made for a sum to be recommended by Cabinet to Council on what is reasonable for general taxpayers to bear. So you're right, there's a mix of things in there, and many of them are directly income generating. They're not normally fully commercial ventures, because if there were fully commercial ventures, other sectors would step in. We have a place-making, place-shaping role to do, and delivering public good. When it comes to education, for example, we spend hundreds of millions every time we do a refresh of the schools programme, important for the right learning environment for children and other students, but there ain't much money to be made in charging for education. We're not, there's hardly anything we can charge for in some services. So that's the position I'd give Julie. I think you're right. It's a mixed economy. There are some that definitely make us income.
And the second question then, based on that, do you know if non-financial benefits are also tracked in addition to the financial ones?
Sorry, I misheard part of that.
Are qualitative benefits tracked in addition to quantitative?
Not directly by myself, but officers particularly in place, which is where many of the commercial type items are, is they do track the wider impact on the economy, wider footfall, as well as so money which is of benefit to us is recognised in the PFMs and the budget setting. Those wider qualitative stuff is recognised and tracked through a number of appropriate fora, but I'm less interested in them myself. I am an economist first before an accountant, and I'm interested in all of the wider spillover benefits, but as the Section 151 officer, I am ultimately interested in bottom line for us. So I don't tend to overly involve myself in that, but I do keep a watching brief on these matters, and I'm aware they do exist, Julie.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any further questions on this paper? If we can move on then. Thank you,
Well,
Ben. I appreciate that.
I think that's a very good point Julie actually brought up. I'd certainly be interested in that area, but very, very interesting point.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Jones. Thank you, Julie, as well. If we can move on then, we've got two reports for information, agenda item 10 and 11. One is the annual review of performance, which is a summary, and the second one is a performance monitoring report. Noting it's been through to Cabinet in December, and it would have also been likewise through to scrutiny. It is for information. There's no one here to respond to any comments or questions. So if there are any, can you raise them and perhaps we can get a response for the next meeting? They say they've been through Cabinet, they've been through scrutiny. I think it's important to note on the links that there are some green areas where performance is on track. I think there's about 52% where they're on track, but there are areas where there's a lot more work to be done and a lot of improvements to be made. But I would imagine scrutiny and Cabinet have picked those areas up. And I wouldn't want as a Governance and Audit Committee to duplicate some of the work that's underway there. Julie.
Thank you, Chair. I don't necessarily feel that all of our comments when this report was previously brought to us have been taken into account, because I still feel there's a potential imbalance between the positives and challenges that the council's facing. And when we look at the appendices, the data that's included in those isn't necessarily reflected in the main body of the report itself. So it's just a comment, but I think it's an important one to make.
Yeah, if we can ask that those comments be taken back to Performance and Finance Committee. Councillor Chris Hawley, I think, still chairs that meeting. And obviously the Cabinet have seen the same report. So, you know, I thank you for those comments, Julie, and we can get it back to both of those forums to see. So aside from that, they're both for noting. If we can move on to agenda item 11. This is the tracker report. There's some ongoing activities there. I think if I can pick up on page 132, reference to the management of absence policy, which has been worked on, and a training session was going to be organised for the committee in 2025. If we can have that included in our training profile, please, Jeremy, if you can do that. And the reference to annual review of performance 23-24, again, it's a similar point to what we made to Mark Wade. It says that the update has been included in the report today. I'm not sure it includes everything that we've previously asked for. And that's that summary of challenges, improvements, and etc. So if there are any other comments, then if we can get those through to Jeremy, if somebody picks something up in due course. And likewise, agenda item 13 is our work plan. It's an ongoing work plan. We can change it, add to it as we feel is necessary. I've got no comments to make on this one today. If any members have any comments, please raise your hands. Noting that the scrutiny committee work plan is there as well, so we can see that there's no gaps in what we're covering, and more importantly, no overlap or duplication between the two committees. But if there are no comments on that, I think that concludes the agenda for today. Can I just thank members for their participation and the questions and the comments that were made? I think all very relevant and and focused on improving the work of the council. So can I thank you all personally once again, and have a lovely evening, and I shall see you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.